All right. I want to say hello and good day and welcome to Emerald Ash Borer University today. And it's coming to you live from my office at Michigan State University. My name is Robin Usborne, and along with my colleagues, Anne Marie Nagel from the Purdue University and Amy Stone from Ohio State University, we hope you'll find this webinar informative. Since this is National EAB Awareness Week, my colleagues and I thought we'd do a presentation on EAB that goes over an update on the basic information on the pest, as well as what's being done regarding EAB management. This should be good information for those of you who are just beginning to deal with the pest. I will start off the presentation with a history of EAB, starting with its discovery in 2002 and how we got to where we are. Amy Stone will be giving us a rundown on EAB biology and life cycle, and Anne Marie Nagel will be finishing off the webinar discussing management of the pest. Now, if you have any questions during this webinar, feel free to write them in the chat pod, and we will be responding to questions after each of our presentations and at the end of the webinar. Please stay tuned until the end because we would like to get your feedback, and we'll be providing a link to the survey that we'd like you to participate in. As well, for those of you needing CEUs, your survey information is necessary for us to process those CEUs. The first 10 people to participate will receive an EAB goodie bag. And if you've received a goodie bag in the past, we still would appreciate your continued feedback on this webinar as well. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available for viewing this week at www.emerald-borer.info. And you will also find the recordings for all previous EAB University webinars there. Please give us some feedback about you, because we always want to know how we can make these better. Thank you for attending today, and I'm going to bring up my presentation, and we will begin. All right, as many of you know, emerald ash borer was first discovered in the Detroit area in Michigan in 2002. Since that time, the havoc that has wreaked on North America by the emerald ash borer on our ash tree population has catapulted this insect into the dubious distinction of being the most devastating forest pest on the continent. So emerald ash borer was in the Detroit area for more than a decade before its discovery. So there's articles out there like this one, published in the Detroit Free Press in 2001, that have made note of the puzzling phenomenon of the dying ash trees that seemed to worsen as time went on. And there was no answers as to why this was happening. This article quotes the horticultural consultant as saying, well, that was whatever was killing the ash trees was worse than Dutch elm disease because it was spreading faster, and it seemed to be killing ash stands in almost one season. There was an MSU extension plant pathologist in Detroit who wasn't quite sure what was going on, but he suggested that it might be the disease called ash yellows. To give you an idea of the scope of the problem back then, there was about 11.56 million ash trees in the infested area of southeast Michigan. And of that, there were 11 million forest ash trees, and 5.5 million forest ash were dead and dying at that time. There was about 650,000 landscape ash trees at that time, with 290,000 dead or declining. And still, no one knew why. This changed in June of 2002 when a nurseryman brought larval examples into the Michigan State University Extension office in Oakland County. Stumped as to what it was, the extension agent sent it on to the Michigan State Diagnostic Lab, where the resident bug sleuth there made a guess as to its genus, but he wasn't exactly sure of what it was, and he sent it on to the USDA Forest Service in Minnesota. The USDA sent it on to the Smithsonian Institution, where there is an insect specimen for every insect known to North America. But when they couldn't identify it either, this meant that it was not native to North America. But what was it? Well, they knew it was a wood-boring beetle, and that led them to confer with a couple of entomologists from the Slovak region of Bratislava. These were beetle specialists who, fortunately, were able to solve the mystery. They identified it as Agrilus planipennis, a wood-boring pest native to Asia. But other than that, there wasn't much more they could share because not much was known about this insect except it infests ash trees. Well, now what? The only other information found on the pest at that time was a 2-page discussion in Chinese in a book on international forest pests. Ho Ping Lu, who was then a postdoctoral entomology student at Michigan State, was able to translate this information and contact its author, who was a Chinese entomologist. Unfortunately, this entomologist's work had been destroyed during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, so we didn't really have much more information than that 2-page document. Researchers were starting from square one as far as understanding this pest biology and life cycle. This is pretty vital information if this pest was to be controlled and eradicated. And meanwhile, the Michigan Department of Agriculture and the DNR, along with the Forest Service and the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, were busy doing a delimiting survey in southeastern Michigan in an attempt to get a handle on where this pest was and how far it had spread. There were quarantines being implemented in 6 counties in southeast Michigan at that time, and under the quarantine, it was illegal to move ash trees, branches, lumber, firewood, and other materials unless they had been chipped to 1 inch in diameter. There was also an eradication plan created in hopes of containing the pest in that area, but that soon proved to be futile. Meanwhile, we had to get the word out about the discovery of EAB, and this is where I entered the picture. Deborah McCullough, who is Michigan State's forest entomologist and has been studying the pest since its discovery, called our communications unit requesting a writer to help her get the word out about the new exotic insect, and I just happened to have time that day to meet her and talk with her about it, and the rest is history. The article that she and I wrote, and in addition to the other information provided by the other state departments, contributed to the media blitz that hit the state in mid-July, in this article in the Detroit Free Press. The Michigan Department of Agriculture held a press conference in Detroit in a shopping mall there that had landscape ash trees that were infested with EAB. Here, Deb McCullough, ash log in hand, explains how EAB is killing ash trees. And she's talking there to a couple of the local television stations. So now that EAB is here, what is going to happen? And how are we going to be able to stop it? There was a cavalcade of committees that were created and to get the job done, including the Michigan Invasive Species Task Force. These were the folks that are involved in that, the groups that were involved in that, and some other committees. The Special Operations and Management Group put ideas into action, and the science panel was made up of researchers from all over the country who were looking at best ways to control or eradicate the pest. And the Communications Committee, this was born to spread the word about the pest and hopefully do that faster than the pest was spreading. This EAB Communications Committee was developed by the Public Information Officer at the Michigan Department of Agriculture and myself. We decided to join forces in an attempt to provide some consistent and accurate, reliable information on EAB. And we also invited the information specialists from the state departments of natural resources and the USDA to join us. Some of us were new at working with invasive species, and others of us were veterans. What is unique about this group is that something like this had never been done before. Most times, each organization disseminates information independent of the others. but with EAB inquiries hitting us really hard and fast, this proved to be a better way to handle it all. In addition, the emeralddashboard.info website was created also in early 2003 with the goal of being the one-stop shop for everything emerald ash borer. Now, in 2003, we see that EAB has infested more ash trees than the original 6 quarantine counties. Researchers are finding out more and more about EAB at this time, and a lot of money and manpower is being poured into the research and surveys for the pest in Michigan. And not long after EAB was discovered in Michigan in 2002, it was also found in Canada. Meanwhile, Ohio joined us with its first EAB infestation in 2003, and that's when we began working with Ohio State University and the Ohio Department of Agriculture on research and outreach and information. Maryland had also found an infestation, but it was able to eradicate that infestation, or so we thought. And in 2004, EAB was found in Indiana for the first time, and we began working also with our friends at the Purdue University Extension and the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. This gives you an idea here. It's clear that EAB infestations now in 2004 are far beyond the bounds of southeast Michigan, and it's also clear that the infested nursery stock can account for some of the infestations, but for the most part, we are finding more and more at this time that human movement of infested ashwood, like firewood, is the big culprit. To give you an idea of what's at stake as far as our ash species, and you may see this slide again today, this is the native range of ash in North America, and that's more than 8 billion forests and woodland trees. In addition, there are many more millions of landscape ash trees that were planted in municipalities across the continent. This slide that was provided by the Michigan Department of Agriculture gives you a rundown of what's at stake for our ash. I think the most telling are the 2% loss of their total leaf area and the billions of dollars that's going to be spent nationwide and lost in managing this pest. Here's the native range of emerald ash borer, which is native to Asia, as well as the adjacent Mongolia and Russia. And a lot of times we're asked, why isn't a big problem there? Now, this for the most part is because ash trees and the insect evolved to a level where the ash trees have some defenses, but our ash trees here in North America are not so lucky. Now, in 2005, the USDA started creating maps showing all confirmed EAB infestations in the States and in Canada. What we learned was a lot about the pest in 2002, and we continue at that time to work on better ways to be able to find it. In January of 2006, we see that EAB is slowly creeping southward. We were hoping at one time that we could keep it out of the southern parts of Ohio and Indiana, but that proved to be fruitless. Now, in 2004, the EAB Communications Group came up with the idea of creating an EAB Awareness Week, which is the week before Memorial Day, because Memorial Day heralds the beginning of the summer travel season. The first EAB Awareness Week encompassed 3 states, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio, and the governors from those 3 states all signed official proclamations endorsing EAB Awareness Week. And in 2006, this Indiana EAB Awareness event featured people dressed in EAB costumes and demonstrations by an EAB sniffing dog and other family activities. And EAB Awareness Week, of course, continues to this day, and with numerous states and organizations, including like the Boy Scouts, holding events to promote awareness. The Master Gardeners have been a huge help in getting the word out about emerald ash borer, and many were trained on detection methods at extension workshops during the first days of EAB. During EAB Awareness Week, many of them would volunteer to hand out materials about EAB at rest areas along major travel routes in the 3 states. And they were also there to participate not only in that, but also talking to folks who were there with Firewood that was getting checked over by the state officials at some of these rest stops. And the firewood checks, a lot of times folks would just drop off their suspected firewood. Okay, survey efforts were being stepped up outside of the infested areas to see if EAB was outside of those states and areas. And trying to find an easier way to survey and detect EAB led to the development of these purple traps. These are the PVC pipes that were used in the development of those traps. EAB, for some reason, is attracted to the color purple. And this photo depicts the process of creating these traps, which are coated with a sticky substance when they are done that catches the EAB when they land on the traps. This particular development was done at one of the research centers at Michigan State University, and passersby would stop and ask if they were creating a big abstract art design on the lawn. In June of 2006, Illinois found its first EAB infestation, and in August of that year, EAB was again found in that once thought to be eradicated area in Maryland. By October of 2007, EAB was found in more places in Illinois and also in Pennsylvania. Also, in October, an EAB Research and Technology Development meeting in Pittsburgh outlined much of what was going to be done in combating the beetle as far as research and technology. And this is just a small sampling of what was being discussed. Biocontrol had been ongoing since 2003, and you're going to hear more about that from Anne Marie later in this webinar. By December of 2008, new emerald ash borer finds had been detected in Missouri, Virginia, Wisconsin, West Virginia, and in Quebec, Canada. Note that there are also more EAB finds in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Another issue that was gaining more and more importance at the time was how to deal with all the dead ash trees. Municipalities were also coming to grips with the devastation and the financial burden that EAB was creating. In May, it was found in Kentucky and Minnesota, and in June, it was found in New York in 2009. Here's a 2010 map which shows Tennessee and Iowa's addition to the new states with the EAB finds. In this November of 2011 map, you're going to notice that the states are less of a bread blob mess, as it was decided it was easier to document what counties were infested with EAB rather than every new EAB find in the states. Research at that time was now taking a slight shift and focusing more on efforts on how to save ash trees by looking at the differences between ash genetics in North America and Asia, and what species of ash in North America may be more resistant to EAB than others. Blue ash they found is somewhat slightly more resistant. And they were also looking at breeding for EAB resistant ash. There was also more multi-year data on effectiveness of various insecticides and how many years of control some of those insecticides could offer. Also, there was discussions about what was going on with multi-year studies on what happens after EAB comes through an area with regard to insect population, other animals, birds, and other plants. There was also an update on biocontrol efforts. In July of 2012, Connecticut became the 16th state to be infested with EAB, and Kansas became the 17th state in August to have an EAB infestation. And here we are in 2013. New Hampshire joined the party in March of this year as number 18. And also, you'll notice on this map that the heavy blue quarantine lines have been redrawn. The federal government has made movement of ash materials allowable within these states to other states and area. EAB continues to be very challenging, and with municipal, state, and federal budgets shrinking, it's taking a lot of ingenuity by a lot of folks to find ways to fight this pest with fewer dollars. All right, there's some kind of a quick outline of what's been going on, and I appreciate your attention. And remember, don't move firewood. Are there any questions? I can take them now. If not, we can move on. Okay, George says, knowing it's spreading west of the Mississippi, unabated, what do you think is the top priority? I think it's public safety. Dead ash trees in public will cost lives and property. Less a concern are ecology and aesthetics. The response will need to be intense, immediate, and coordinated. Public safety. I think that's probably a good thought. I'm also thinking that right now what our folks, the folks that I work with are hoping to do, maybe probably in regard to that, is also slow down the death of ash trees using different management options. They're working on that. You're right though, but public safety, especially in municipalities, is going to be a concern. Wow, Sue says EAB has been found in adjoining counties 20 miles away. Our subdivision 100% green ash trees. Is it 100% sure EAB will move into our area? Well, Sue, there are ways to look at that. If you go on the emeralddashboard.info website, there's a document right there on the home page that you can access that talks about insecticide options for homeowners and others. There's different ways to talk about what your options are with that. And I think this is also a good point where you can say that EAB has kind of proven to us that we need to be diversifying our tree species when we do our plantings in municipalities and subdivisions. So Michelle says, why does EAB seem to be spreading faster to the east than west? I think, I don't really know the exact answer to that, but I think what we're getting as time goes on, we're getting much better at finding detection, ways to detect EAB. And also you're talking about areas over there in the east, they're a lot more populated, so there's a lot more movement of people and materials, and I think that might also be something that is an aspect. Oh, Laura, what is the minimum size of ash that EAB attacks? EAB will attack small ash trees, circumference of, 3 inches or even a little less probably. Depending on the population of EAB in the area, they will attack anything that they feel like they need. Are there other host trees besides ash? In all the research that our folks have done between the Forest Service and the universities, there has never been another species of tree that has been able to create viable emerald ash borer. So they may, if they have no choice, and what they call no choice tests that they perform, they may land on it, they may put eggs on it, the eggs may hatch, but they do not live. So no, if there's a EAB right now is just heading for the ash trees. Okay. We can take other questions later, but I'm going to bring up Amy Stone's presentation and we'll listen to what Amy's got to share.
Great job, Robin.
Thanks.
I'll also talk a little bit about some host tree information. My assignment for today is to actually cover the life cycle and biology of emerald ash borer, and then its interaction with the host plants, specifically Fraxinus species. Let's see here. I'm having a hard time advancing the slides, Robin. I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So, let's get started. Taxonomy-wise, emerald ash borer is a beetle, and it belongs to a family known as the metallic wood borers. Adults of many of these species are in the same family as some of our native wood borers, like the bronze birch borer and the two-line chestnut borer. And one of the characteristics for these beetles are kind of a metallic gleam or color to them, which actually make them kind of a favorite of insect collectors. A lot of these beetles appear like they've been painted with a metallic flaked paint. Very pretty, actually. The biology is really quite similar to these native relatives that I mentioned. Typically there's one generation per year, although it has been observed the development can take up to 2 years, and this especially happens or occurs when an infestation is new to an area, so population numbers are low, and the health of the ash trees they're really healthy, and they're trying to fight off or stop the insect from further invading. The adult beetles are usually between 1/4 and 1/2 an inch, and I've heard several people mention or say they're about the size of a Tic Tac, and so that kind of gives you a visual perspective of the size of the beetle. Not very large for the damage that this insect can cause. After emerging, they'll actually feed for about 1 to 2 weeks, causing some leaf notching that I'll show in just a second. Those adult beetles will mate and lay eggs, and then the female, she can lay usually between 40 to 100 eggs, and they're laid individually on the bark of ash trees, often between cracks and crevices. The one thing that hopefully everybody has heard, or when we hear emerald ash borer, we automatically jump to the D-shaped exit holes, because on ash trees really there's nothing else like that. And so we do see some native borers on ash trees. Those move in when the ash trees are especially stressed. But emerald ash borer, as indicated in the photo here, you can actually see the flat side. And just imagine this is the top of the beetle where the head is, and this round is where the belly is. And you can see here the flat head, round belly. And those can actually be in all different directions on the tree. And so, the D-shaped can be in different perspectives, up, down, side to side. And once a tree is heavily infested, those D-shaped exit holes can be very close to each other. This photo was taken actually on an ash tree that was planted at my house. Heavily infested area. We were in definitely the peak population, and so beetles were very easy to see. It is important to note, though, in the beginning of the infestation, sometimes it's difficult to see a lot of beetle activity. The other thing that we've received a lot of phone calls about is when people treat their trees to protect them from the emerald ash borer. Often the insecticide can be moved through the leaves, and as the adult beetles feed, they can come in contact and fall down. And so we've had several people call and talk to me that they were seeing a collection of those beetles underneath infested trees that had been treated. The emerald ash borer larvae are actually the killers of the ash trees. And so this stage of the insect has bell-shaped curves, and it's almost flat, kind of tapeworm-like looking. And so just imagine being able to put this insect kind of in between pages of a book and not totally flattening it out like a pancake. Other native borers that we see in ash trees, either that are stressed for other reasons, or even when they become stressed because of emerald ash borer, often are more round or robust. I often refer to them as kind of the Michelin tire man looking larvae, and so they're more rounded. Early instars they'll hatch from the egg on the outside of the tree. They'll chew through the bark into the phloem tissue where they begin feeding. And so they feed primarily in the phloem and the cambium layer. And I'll illustrate that with kind of a line drawing in the next slide. And so this is the stage of the insect that's killing the tree. And sometimes that's difficult for a lot of people to visualize because it's underneath the bark and they really don't see them unless they start peeling back bark, like in that initial photo of me kind of trying to find emerald ash borer in an infested tree. As the insects feed, they'll actually make these galleries they're easily seen underneath the bark. So let's take a look at life cycle, and let's start out kind of where we are right now. And so depending on where you are in the United States, definitely our conditions and progression of spring into summer may vary. But right now in Northwest Ohio, we're actually at the beginning of the adult emergence. And so this has already occurred in places south. So Tennessee, Kentucky, even southern Ohio, and it has not yet occurred in places north, so into Michigan and of course the Upper Peninsula. These insects will start to emerge, and it actually will continue all season long throughout the summer, usually kind of ending in August, maybe early September, again depending on your weather conditions. Those beetles, as they emerge, need to become mature, and they do that through feeding on the foliage of ash trees and making those notching on the outside edges. Once they mate, she'll lay the eggs individually. Those eggs will hatch. The larvae immediately feeds through the bark of the tree and feeds in that phloem tissue. In the fall, they'll actually kind of go into this pre-pupal stage where they fold themselves over. Some people refer to it as J-hooking, and often it's either kind of just on the inside that bark layer, or sometimes they'll actually make that J-hook and into the xylem. So they're actually etching the xylem, and you'd have to actually dig into the tree a little bit further to find them in that stage. It's that stage that they'll overwinter, and we'll talk about that overwintering stage and what's one more thing that can kind of draw us to when we talk about diagnostic symptoms. They'll go through the winter. In the spring, as our conditions warm, they'll actually pupate, and so you can see here we've got a pupa where they look like an adult beetle, but they're white or creamy colored like the larvae. They'll go through that stage, emerge as an adult beetle, and the cycle will continue. I had mentioned that in Northwest Ohio we're just starting to see adult emergence of the emerald ash borer. This coincides with the blooming of black locust. And so if you can think visually what's been going on in your own area, if you have black locusts and they've bloomed, adult emergence has begun. If you're a little further north and that hasn't happened yet, as you see the black locust, that kind of should be a trigger that, okay, we've got adult emergence starting. If you're into the growing degree day calendar and that work, that happens at 550 growing degree days. I have put the website for the work that Dr. Dan Herms has done in Ohio, but it is Ohio specific. But many states also have a growing degree day website and calendar that you could also follow as it relates to kind of the life cycle and the adult emergence. This kind of gets back to Phil's question, are there other hosts? And Robin talked about this briefly. So the good news is that emerald ash borer only attacks ash trees or Fraxinus species. We have heard some rumors. People hear that the word ash and think that maybe mountain ash would be a susceptible host. It's actually a different genus, and so if you have mountain ash, they have kind of some of their own problems, but you don't have to be worried about the emerald ash borer impacting or attacking those trees. It is important to know that all Fraxinus species are at risk. Green ash tends to be their favorite, and so if you have a landscape full of trees or you work in a community that maybe emerald ash borer hasn't reached you yet, but you're starting to kind of monitor for pest pressure, the green ash and those ash trees that are stressed for some reason, either maybe environmental conditions, other pest pressures, those would be the ones that I would really focus on. But they will kind of work through, including white ash, black ash. There seems to be some blue ash that has maybe less susceptibility. Not to say that they're not infested, but that's kind of something to look for. Robin showed a map kind of the overall picture of ash in North America. This just further breaks it down by species. But what's important to know is ash trees were really good trees, and so even if they weren't growing natively in an area, they were planted. And many communities planted a lot of ash trees, especially following the loss of elms. And so there are communities, like the example that 100% of their street trees in that particular development are ash. Many communities are facing high populations of ash trees, and so again it is important to make sure that we diversify that. If you have questions about identifying ash trees, there's a lot of great fact sheets out there. There's also information on seed collection. But the value of ash aesthetically and benefits like stormwater remediation really is important, and so we need to consider that with that loss of canopy if nothing is done. If we just kind of go back to basic biology here, so we've got the outside of the bark, the phloem tissue, the cambium, which is kind of a 3-cell layer, very small, between the phloem and the xylem. And much of the emerald ash borer larvae, its life cycle will be spent here in the phloem tissue, feeding into the cambium, and often they'll just etch the xylem. And so you don't have to dig into the xylem or the heartwood of the tree to find these guys. They are just right underneath the bark, easily accessed for people looking for emerald ash borer, as well as woodpeckers going after them for a diet. These two photos illustrate the emerald ash borer larvae, again just underneath that bark layer, feeding in that phloem tissue, and the galleries that they create. Emerald ash borer are frass packers, and so you can see the sawdust here, sawdust-like excrement packed right in. If you go up to an ash tree and there's sawdust on the outside of the tree, maybe collecting between branches or at the base of the tree, it's most likely one of our native borers that kind of kick that sawdust or that frass out. Emerald ash borer tries to keep that inside the tree. As you'll see, as emerald ash borer comes into an area and the impact on the host trees, this is actually a 5-point scale that a lot of the scientists are using. It was developed by Anne Marie Smith when she was doing her graduate work at Ohio State. And so you can see they would rank the trees during their studies from 1 showing no decline or very little decline all the way to 5 being dead. This also shows you kind of the canopy decline that you'll see early on, plus the epicormic sprouts that occur. So you'll see this dense canopy in the center of the tree. And then once the tree dies, you will see these sucker sprouts or water sprouts coming, and so the root system of the trees are still intact, still healthy, so they're trying to push up as much growth as they can. We will see emerald ash borer into the root flares, but it doesn't kill the roots outright, at least by feeding on them. Quickly, emerald ash borer diagnostics, what to look for. So tree canopy decline as well as heavy woodpecker activity. You need to be careful though, these symptoms could be caused by something else, so you really have to check in and do a little more sleuthing or diagnostics, and that further diagnostics will include peeling back bark, looking for the actual larvae underneath the tree, as well as adult activity. You'll see the serpentine frass-filled galleries, and so this is a great example of one gallery. In a heavily infested tree, you'll see gallery next to gallery next to gallery. And then of course the D-shaped exit holes, which are specific to the emerald ash borer. And so with that, it kind of gives you a highlight of the life cycle, the biology of emerald ash borer, as well as diagnostics and the impact of its host. And so with that, I can take a couple questions, or we can go ahead and kind of switch over to Anne Marie and then maybe follow up with questions at the very end. Quick question as we switch the actual PowerPoints, and we're getting ready for Anne Marie. Sue had a question. Do you agree that once a tree shows about 25% canopy loss, it's too late for treatment? There has been some research done that trees that were showing 50% canopy dieback have kind of come back. It's a process because those trees are very stressed. And so it is important that if you're going to go down that road of treatment, and Anne Marie's going to talk about that, is to do that sooner or later than later. And the effectiveness, Anne Marie is going to also talk about that in her session coming up.
All right, great. Thanks, Amy. So I guess I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Anne Marie Nagel. I'm here at Purdue University, and I'll be covering the management and insecticide options for our EAB 101 webinar. So we've come a very long way in our approaches to managing this insect in the past 11 years. But one of the hard facts about this insect that hasn't changed is that it's almost 100% lethal to our North American ash trees that are planted in city environments. There always seem to be those folks that are holdouts who see ash trees dying all around them, but they're still in denial that their individual tree will pull through, and this simply is not the case. We've also seen some really big changes in the federal quarantines, as Robin mentioned, and the primary function of the federal and state quarantines for EAB these days is to attempt to slow the spread of emerald ash borer by limiting the movement of ash materials in firewood, so the artificial spread of the insect. And quarantines are also generally a means of raising public awareness about the problem. So when it comes to managing ash in urban or suburban environments, there are basically two options available. If treatment is applied early enough, the ash trees can be protected with certain insecticides. However, if they're not treated, they will need to be cut down. Unfortunately, when it comes to ash in forested and woodland settings, treatments are generally cost prohibitive and are not really a viable management option. So because we do have some options to work with in urban settings, I'm going to focus on this area for the rest of my talk. And I do want to mention that removals and treatments are not mutually exclusive. So most of the best modern EAB management plans that have been developed are sort of a hybrid between proactive removals of low-value ash trees and treatment of a portion of the most healthy and valuable ash trees. And as I'll be talking about later, creating an EAB management plan before the insect is actually detected in your area affords many more management options and allows people to have more control over their urban forest and how it looks and functions. So basically, in the absence of planning, you're letting the bug call all the shots, and this is what results. We get a lot of standing dead trees, and essentially this happens all at once. And the unfortunate thing about ash trees that are killed by EAB is that once they're dead, they begin to decay very, very rapidly. They become extremely brittle and easily drop limbs or completely topple over. And obviously trees in this condition in an urban environment are extremely hazardous, especially if they're near a target like a street or sidewalk or somebody's home. Standing dead ash trees are also extremely dangerous to the tree crews that are tasked with removing them. And most tree crews will not send climbers into these hazardous trees. So it involves moving in specialized equipment for removals, which increases the expense. So we always recommend that ash trees that need to be removed are removed before they're completely killed. So in addition, ash trees that are dead are no longer providing beneficial ecosystem services that healthy landscape trees provide. And obviously barren streets are not really nice places to live. So fortunately, there has been a suite of reliable management tools that have been developed over the past 11 years for people to help people take charge of their ash resources. Also, emerald ash borer is now predictable. And by saying that EAB is predictable, I don't mean that we know where it's going to show up next. It's still extremely difficult to detect new infestations. But I mean that once the first EAB detection is made in an area, we know generally how it will behave. The exponential death curve model has been played out again and again in infested communities, and we know that once a detection is made, there is typically only a period of 5 or 6 years before the ash tree is totally, all of the ash trees are totally dead. So communities can now know what is coming their way. Unlike cities like Detroit and others in Michigan and Northern Ohio who had essentially no idea what had just hit them when EAB arrived. The next part of our discussion will go into some detail. Amy? Amy, can you mute your mic? Thank you. So I'll go into some detail about the management tools that are available in the EAB Toolbox. We'll talk about tree inventories and valuation, insecticide treatments, a couple of EAB cost calculators, and some public awareness tools. So whether we're talking about a homeowner managing the ash trees in their yard or a municipality that's managing thousands of publicly held ash trees, the first step in formulating any sort of viable management strategy is an accurate tree inventory. A good inventory will include information about numbers of ash trees, their size, and some sort of evaluation of their vigor or health. There are some excellent modern GIS tools available to enhance data collection and sharing and map making capabilities that are compatible with tree valuation tools. So many of you have probably heard of the iTree suite of tree valuation tools, which is available through the U.S. Forest Service. And it's a really great way for communities to assess the services that are provided by their urban forest canopy and perform cost-benefit analyses for tree planting and care and other factors. And the National Tree Benefit Calculator is another tree valuation tool that is geared more towards more towards a homeowner audience. And it's a way for homeowners to visualize and place a real dollar value on services that are provided by the trees on their properties. And these are really excellent tools and help folks place values on environmental benefits that are typically very difficult to quantify. So moving on to another tool in the toolbox, insecticide treatments. Treatments have been the subject of very intense research over the past several years, and fortunately, science has come up with or elucidated treatments that both work and are cost-effective in many cases. And more communities are learning about treatment as an option for managing their trees, and they're being more widely used in municipal management plans and also on homeowner properties. And there are two general management goals that treatments are helping to achieve. The first goal is to preserve high-value, healthy ash trees for the duration of their service lives. And the second way is to temporarily delay mortality using treatment, and with the understanding that the trees will not be preserved for the long term. So the idea behind this is that mortality is delayed so the removals are staged out over time to help with removal costs. And this also gives time for replacement trees to grow and to help retain canopy and environmental function of the urban forest. So we've had some excellent presentations on the very latest research on insecticide treatments in previous Emerald Ash Borer University webinars, so I'm just going to provide a really quick overview here. There are 3 insecticide active ingredients that have been shown in the research to be effective against emerald ash borer, and they are imidacloprid, dinotefuran, and emamectin benzoate. All of these are systemic products, meaning that they're applied to the roots or to the trunk of the tree and are distributed throughout the tree's tissues to where the beetles will actually consume them through the tree's vascular system. So the effectiveness and the appropriateness of these treatments are influenced by 3 factors. The first is tree size, tree condition, and then time of year. And I don't have time to discuss all of these in detail, but you can find more detailed insecticide recommendations on Purdue's Emerald Ash Borer website, which is eabindiana.info, and there's a link to all of this insecticide information right on the front page. So one of the reasons that planning in advance for an EAB infestation is so important is that the effectiveness of treatment depends greatly on the initial health of the treated tree. Because treatments are systemic, the nutrient and water conducting tissues of the tree must be functioning effectively. And as Amy mentioned, the EAB feeds directly in the phloem tissue, which conducts nutrients. So if the tree has had a lot of emerald ash borer feeding, those tissues are damaged, and the tree typically requires a stronger treatment if it has sustained a lot of damage. Also, the tree must be actively transpiring or moving water through the stem if it is to effectively transport these systemic products. So this is why springtime is recommended as the optimal treatment period, and this is also why watering the treated trees both before and after treatment application is very important. So moving on to cost calculators in our toolbox, there have been 2 very useful cost calculators developed to help homeowners and urban forest managers who are trying to make sense of all of the cost and benefit trade-offs associated with different management strategies. And the first of these is the EAB Cost Calculator 2.0, which was developed by Dr. Cliff Sadoff here at Purdue. For those folks who are dealing with budgetary concerns, one of the great things about this cost calculator is that it allows them to compare both cumulative and annual costs over a 25-year period. And so this makes the calculator useful at any point along the invasion wave. So whether EAB is not present yet or whether it started taking out trees already. This calculator can be customized to reflect local costs of management and also the local size of the forest, or it can be run with default values to get a general idea in comparison of different management strategies. It is freely available online, and the link is on your screen here. Another cost calculator has been developed by Dr. Rich Hauer and Andrew Van Natta at the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point. And this is a really neat one to play around with as well, and is again customizable to the forest in question. But it takes a bit of a different approach and allows the comparison of costs and benefits associated with several different financial and environmental objectives, and brings all of those variables together in a comparison of 5 different management scenarios. So this one is also free and available at the link on your screen, and it's most useful as a planning tool for communities that are not yet infested with EAB. So the final tool in our toolbox is public awareness. And the majority of ash trees in cities and towns are actually on private property. So homeowner education about EAB's impacts and what management options are available to them is really important. So an example of an effective public awareness and action system is Purdue's Neighbors Against Bad Bugs program. And we work with extension personnel and master gardeners to educate and raise awareness about EAB's impacts in neighborhoods and try to motivate advanced planning. Volunteer tree tagging is a really important aspect of this program, and tagging ash trees in neighborhoods serves to raise awareness about the location and abundance of ash trees, because a lot of people simply don't even know what an ash tree looks like. And it also provides a reliable source of science-based information for folks who want to learn more about EAB and what they can do. This program is especially useful if the neighborhood already has a homeowners association or some sort of communication scheme in place. We've also had some webinars here at Emerald Ash Borer University talking about outreach to policymakers, and this is becoming a more important aspect to managing EAB on a municipal level, because these are also the budget makers and decide how the city money is spent. And finally, media engagement is a very important aspect of generally getting everyone up to date on what the local situation is. So there's another interesting management prospect for EAB that I did not include in our EAB management toolbox because there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and that aspect is biocontrol. So Robin mentioned that in 2003, USDA scientists went back to China and brought back 3 species of non-stinging parasitoid wasps from China to try to bring back the natural balance that EAB has in its native environment. These wasp species are now being mass reared in Michigan for release in infested states. And if you're not familiar with what parasitoids are, they're sort of the aliens of the insect world. They lay their eggs on the emerald ash borer eggs or larvae and feed on the body of that insect, so they eventually kill it. But So the outlook for biocontrol is still a really big question mark, but it's generally considered to be a long-term management tool. It's not likely to affect the first wave of emerald ash borer because the EAB populations are simply too high, and parasitoids take some time to actually establish in the environment. But we're hopeful that after EAB populations in an area decline, parasitoids may be able to keep them low so that residual ash trees can survive, or it may reduce or potentially eliminate the need to treat ash trees that have been carried through the EAB wave with insecticide treatments. So our fingers are crossed, and there's still a lot of research being done on these insects. So that concludes my presentation, and with that, we'll take any questions if we have a few minutes left here.
So folks, you've kind of gotten the synopsis of what's going on with emerald ash borer now and what's kind of gone on before. And I hope this has been helpful for you. So we're going to wait for your questions here for a few minutes. If you want to stay on, not a problem. We're here as long as you are.
Okay, I think maybe the next question here was, do the EAB stay in one tree until the level reaches a certain amount, or after each adult exits, does it find a new tree? That's a good question, Adam. I believe that EAB readily disperses. They're not like Asian longhorn beetle in that they prefer to infest and reinfest the same tree over and over again until it's completely dead. They do readily disperse, but when EAB population levels in an area are high, they do end up consuming every square inch of edible phloem inside the tree. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Question from Mark, will we only observe exit holes within 6 feet of the ground? No, Mark. Actually, the first exit holes happen in the very top of the canopy. So the first symptom that we typically see on infested trees is a decline up in the top 1/3 of the canopy. And that's because that's where the beetles start feeding. So there will be exit holes way up in the top of the canopy, but because they are so tiny, they're very difficult to see until they do get onto the main trunk of the tree. And unfortunately, once you start seeing exit holes appearing on the main bole, the tree is already very heavily infested and is pretty far gone. Okay.
I see one here.
Robin,
from
did
Adam.
I miss?
Yeah, it says Adam says, if I understand you correctly, the chemical treatment does not eliminate the EAB from the tree, just prolongs the damage so the tree can be removed in a timely fashion. No, it will eliminate the EAB from the tree. Especially when you have some of these that are injected, like the emamectin benzoate, any kind of those, they will kill the larva in the tree, and they also provide somewhat of a deferred feed as far as EAB will try to eat the leaves that have been treated with, especially with the emamectin benzoate, and they don't want to eat it. They will die. It will kill them. So mainly chemical treatment will eliminate the EAB. I guess that's the bottom line. And Mark, you are asking about comparing the effectiveness of the 3 chemical treatments. I don't have that information right in front of me, but if you get on the emeraldashborer.info website and look at the insecticide options for homeowners and some of the other information there, they do kind of provide a table that talks about what happens there, and that's probably a little more in depth than we can get here. So treatment never ending or until the tree might be replaced. At this point, some of the treatments can be done every year. Other treatments can be done every 3 years. It's kind of one of those things that you will have to decide as far as how you want to manage your ash trees and what works best for you economically, and as far as, you know, if you want to replace them eventually or what you think you want to do. Bob, this presentation right now will be available as a webinar, a recorded webinar that you can replay at any time, and it will be on emeraldashboard.info if that's helpful. Okay. All right.
Joanne asked, by the time we notice canopy declining, is it too late? And Joanne, not necessarily. We typically say that when trees have lost 30% of their canopy, it's getting to be a little bit too much canopy decline. Trees that have sustained more damage do require a stronger treatment typically. Mark asks, any evidence to the theory that after an area is heavily infested, the bugs move on, leaving treated trees safe from infestation? Mark, that is a theory that's out there. It has not been experimentally tested yet because these insecticide treatments are still relatively new technology and have not been widely applied in areas where, you know, EAB has already come through and killed all of the untreated ash phloem. But it kind of remains to be seen. There is some thinking that you may be able to treat the trees on a regular aggressive basis until the initial wave of EAB moves through, and then you may be able to scale treatments back into an sort of integrated pest management approach and treat them less often. But again, that has not been experimentally elucidated yet.
Tim, you asked about the bark spraying and is it effective and to what height? Again, that information is available in that homeowners insecticide options document that is on the homepage of the emeraldashboard.info website, and that can give you a little more, like I say, a little more in-depth information that, you know, than I can give you right here. And that information has been developed by researchers in both in numerous states that have been dealing with EAB. Okay, I've put up the survey slide, so if you would be so kind as to access that and give us your thoughts and be eligible for an EAB goodie bag, we'd appreciate it. I want to say thank you, and again, this is EAB Awareness Week, so I hope you go out there and help us spread the word about EAB and how we can try to save our ashes. I'm going to, it's my clock says it is now 9 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to close this meeting at 11 minutes past the hour. How about that? Unless there's any more questions. And you can always email one of us or give us a call, and we can also help you with some questions as well. Thanks to my colleagues, Anne Marie and Amy. It's good to have you on here, and I think we all learned a lot.